Welcome to episode 1 of the 007 Files podcast. My name is David Leigh, and on this first episode I am joined by my two co-hosts, and we're going to tell you a bit about who we are and what to expect from our podcast that is going to make it a bit different. So guys, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Bill Koenig. I'm with the blog The Spy Command and longtime Bond fan.
And I am Javi Trujillo. I write comic book reviews for David at thejamesbonddossier.com, and I'm also a senior contributor at batmanonfilm.com.
I should say, in case you don't know me, I'm responsible for the James Bond Dossier website, and I'm also author of The Complete Guide to the Drinks of James Bond. And, well, I had the idea for this podcast months ago. It's taken forever to get going for one reason or another. Basically, I wanted to do something that was a bit more concise than a lot of podcasts, and I think there's certainly a place for long form podcasts, but I don't always have time to consume that kind of content, and I assume there are other people like me who don't necessarily have the time to spend a couple of hours listening to a podcast, even if you break it up into chunks of 20 minutes at a time. So I wanted to do something that is the kind of podcast that I would want to listen to. So that is one of the aims here. Well, when I discussed it with Bill and Javier, they thought it was a good idea, and so here we are. Won't be, I think, all three of us every week. The idea is to split hosting duties a bit, and so with that process, I think that we will be able to have a bit more flexibility in what we can do, because, for example, Bill can go off and talk to somebody one week, and Javier can do the same thing another week. Then we can get together, 2 or 3 of us at a time, and have conversations about other areas of the Bond world. So, I mean, that's really where we are coming from. Is there anything that you want to add, either of you?
I think just because we're in 3 different time zones, even with different lives and different things going on, that having the flexibility will mean hopefully that we can get these things out more frequently than maybe we would if we were all trying to coordinate our schedules. So plus we all have different interests, and the world of Bond is so multifaceted that, maybe I'm more into watches and Bill's more into the automotive side of things, and that we can get different perspectives and things more focused on our interests and bring that out and highlight it.
Yeah,
and
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah.
Just be more
consistent. The time zones difference is a big one as well, because it can be a bit tricky trying to coordinate across multiple time zones. Yeah.
Also, it's an opportunity, at least I hope it works out this way, that we can do some interviews with people with different points of view. There's someone I have in mind that I've been keeping in the loop about the progress of this podcast, and I'm hoping to finally get around to doing that. But yeah, Bond fandom is not a monolith, and like I said, it would be interesting to hear from different perspectives.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think that's one of the keys. Yeah. Okay, so that's really what we're aiming to do. We were talking about this earlier, and we were thinking about our Bond origin stories. And so, do you want to tell me about how each of you got involved with James Bond in the first place?
Well, in my case, my father had been reading the books. How many he read, I don't know. I remember being very little, and he was reading one, and I asked him what it was, and he gave me a brief explanation. And, it's like I only had the faintest memory of it for a long time, and then I finally got my own copy. It turned out he was reading Live and Let Die, specifically the Signet paperback in the U.S. It was the illustration of Mr. Big on the cover that prompted me to ask what he was reading. I then got more immersed in November 1965 when there was this primetime special, The Incredible World of James Bond. And then I saw Thunderball sometime, it had to be the spring of 66. I saw it at a drive-in, but that movie first came out in theaters at Christmas of 65. So I remember the weather being warm enough that the drive-in was open. So it was probably the spring of 66.
Okay. Yeah. So, not quite right from the beginning, but close to it.
Yeah, near the beginning, yes.
Yeah. Now, Javier?
I don't know. I feel like James Bond is one of those things that's just always been in my life. And I don't remember the first Bond movie that I saw, but I was introduced to the character through the films. I come from a family of 7. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So going to the cinema was a big deal because it was expensive. But I remember watching whatever Bond movies were out at the time on VHS and Beta, which was a type of VHS. For those who don't know, it was a cassette that you would put into a VCR.
We had Betamax as well.
Yeah, but I mean, I was born in the late 70s, so I was right in the Roger Moore era, and growing up, my parents would rent them on the weekends, and we'd watch them together. Except for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, my parents said it was no good, so I didn't see that until much later.
Mm-hmm. My parents said On Her Majesty's Secret Service was no good as well, but we still watched it when it was on British TV the first time.
Nice.
Well, actually, I saw On Her Majesty's Secret Service first run in the theater. My mother took me to see it.
Great.
And I didn't know how it was going to turn out. And then I was devastated because in my household, we watched The Avengers. And so like Dinah Rigg died. And we got home, my father's there. Oh, how'd the movie go? He had read the book. So and I talked, he said, well, that's life. That's how it goes.
That's what
I think he was
say.
trying to get across the idea you shouldn't get too caught up. It's okay to enjoy it, but don't get so caught up. Anyway.
We started with the films, and the first one I remember seeing in theaters distinctly was Octopussy,
mm-hmm.
which has its detractors, and there are definitely moments that I don't care for in it, but it still has a special place in my heart because it was the first one I saw on the big screen, and as we went through the 80s, like it was, for me, it was the movies, and
mm-hmm.
when that went fallow. I started turning to the books when I started becoming a teenager and checking them out at the library and doing book reports on them for 8th grade, which, looking back at it, I'm surprised that I was allowed to read those at such a young age. But I remember the first book I got was a John Gardner one my friend bought me for my birthday. Not Never Sent Flowers. Nobody Lives Forever. And I just kind of started my book collecting journey from there. And then 94, I started buying the movies myself on VHS. When Pierce got announced as Bond, I went back, started renting them, started buying them for myself. And it was like, even though I'd seen them all 10 years prior, it was like discovering them again for the first time. And from that moment on, like I never went back. And it was it was really a golden age of Bond back then, because you had a Pierce movie every 2 years. You had video games that were starting to flourish between the N64 GoldenEye and all the games that came after. Raymond Benson was writing a novel every year, maybe 2, if there was a movie coming out. So there were different CDs that were being released. So it was a good time as I, entered my 20s to just fully immerse myself in this character.
It's almost exactly like 2024. Completely not.
Yeah. So it was a good way to get into my Bond fandom.
Yeah, it's interesting that you can't remember the first Bond film you saw.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't. I just remember it being there, and because of the time it wasn't. VHS wasn't necessarily always affordable either, because some of those would cost, $80 a tape. It wasn't until like Batman where they're like, oh, you can get it like day one for like $20. But we had taped, my father, I should say, taped Happy Anniversary 007, premiered for the 25th anniversary of the film series. And even though half of it got recorded over, I still had the back half to watch, and that just kind of cemented things because you had Roger
Who
Moore.
took the blame for that?
Probably my dad. It was probably a soccer match.
Yeah,
but
it's funny. It's funny with Bond because it really does seem like it's been there forever. And it's like my wife sometimes talks about songs. Some songs, even though they've been written within your lifetime, they seem like they've been there forever. It's like Bond certainly has been there since before my lifetime. So the shadow of Bond has always been there.
And I would watch what left of that, what was left of that special all the time, and it just it cemented so many key iconic moments for me because it was basically like a clip show with Roger Moore in between, like talking about how awesome the character and the world of James Bond were, and then at the end of it, it introduced Timothy Dalton. So there's a lot of key moments that are just ingrained in my memory from that show, and then getting to see it, watch the movies again and see like the full picture. They just don't make movies like that anymore, which I think is a topic of conversation.
Well, they barely make Bond movies anymore.
Yeah. Also, real quick on that 25th anniversary special, it was really slickly edited, I thought, because yes, there are clips and with Roger Moore in between, but I remember one in particular. It's like Roger Moore is out skiing and he's wearing the Bogner ski jacket.
Yeah.
And he, says his spiel and then he skis away. And then you go right into a For Your Eyes Only clip where he's wearing the same outfit. And I mean, it was touches like that I thought made it better than average.
I do remember watching the 25th anniversary thing, but I can't remember what was in it at all. But the thought that comes to me is that it's kind of nuts that, Timothy Dalton Timothy Dalton's first film marked the 25th anniversary. But 25 years ago, we had...
The World Was Not Enough.
We had The World Is Not Enough, yes. And it's just like, well, what's happened to all that time?
Yeah.
6 movies.
If I can also add about the Incredible World of James Bond special in 1965, one thing that I think made it special and got my attention, originally Connery was supposed to narrate that, but then like he canceled at the last minute. So they got this character actor named Alexander Scorby, who in addition to acting did a lot of voiceover work because he had a great voice for it. And it kind of gave the thing a gravitas that I'm not sure it would have had Connery done it. Ironically, because it came across as a serious documentary, and I'm not sure it would have if Connery had done it, it would have been like that. And they even did a segment, Bond's Origins, and it was based on the obituary chapter of the You Only Live Twice novel, and where they put together footage of like British commandos training and stuff like that. So they gave a quick overview of Bond, the fictional Bond's life. It was very well done. That's one part of what got me going, Bond fandom. It just caught my interest.
Yeah, and I guess I should talk about how I got into James Bond for anybody who hasn't heard it before. Well, basically, for me, my introduction was via the books. My dad had a paperback copy of Casino Royale, and which I still own. Well, I stole it off him, so what I mean is he doesn't own it anymore. And I read it aged 8 with, a lot of it was way over my head, but I was just utterly transfixed by it. I loved it. And, at about the same time, I also got the Corgi Aston Martin DB5, which I still own, and it's just somewhere on the shelf just behind me. And that's seen better days. I wish I bought 2 of them though. And I remember how much that cost me. It cost 99p in the local store, and I don't know how much Corgi cars go for these days. But
I think they're $45 US. The one that's coming out this year for the Goldfinger 60th, where it recreates the box.
Yeah,
I think that's $45 at the store.
Yeah. That's inflation for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's seen better days. So it was Casino Royale. It was the Corgi Aston Martin. My dad also had a copy of Colonel Sun, although I didn't read it. I think at that stage because it wasn't by Fleming. So the next step though was the Man with the Golden Gun came out. And I remember the lead up to that because there were various articles in the Sunday newspapers and stuff like that, which my dad always kept for me. And then he took me to go and see it on the big screen. And this was before Bond was on TV in the UK. So my first experience was Roger Moore in The Man with the Golden Gun. And that remains my favourite Roger Moore Bond film by far. I love that film. And I know that most people don't regard it very highly at all, but I don't care what anybody else thinks.
Good. I've always appreciated your defense of that movie, and that's like when my parents showed me the films, it wasn't in any particular order. We didn't start from Dr. No and work our way through. It was just whatever was on the shelf, whenever they felt like watching. So as we went through them, like that was The Man with the Golden Gun was the last one that we watched, and I just had so much anticipation to see it because it was just always just sitting there and we never got to it. So it has a special place in my heart too, just because I had such a enthusiasm to watch it. And, you know, as an adult now, it's like, okay, it's not necessarily my favorite Roger Moore. It doesn't have necessarily some of the spectacle and the grandeur of like You Only Live Twice. But I love the Funhouse, Scaramanga's Funhouse.
Because
I'm facing off.
I always say that if David Lynch directed a Bond film, it would be just like the Funhouse.
Yeah, and there's even the GoldenEye Rogue Agent PlayStation 2 video game where you're playing as a anti-Bond. Basically, there's a multiplayer map that has the Funhouse in it, and you can activate certain traps to take out your opponent, and that's one of my favorite multiplayer levels of any video game. It's just so much fun, and it's captured perfectly.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not a big games player, but so I haven't experienced that. But good to hear. Yeah. And yeah, after seeing The Man with the Golden Gun on the big screen, my next Bond experience was reading the book because my next door neighbours at the time, there were 3 boys and 2 of them were about my age, like a year, I think the same year and a couple of years younger. And their dad had The Man with the Golden Gun. So I read that as my second Bond book. And I don't think I even noticed that the plot was different to the film. And for me, it was fine. And I just kept plowing on. Probably the third book I read was Dr. No, because after that, it was Dr. No on TV. And then they showed all the Bond films in order. It was like, I don't know, once a year or once every 6 months, they brought a new Bond film to TV. And in our house, that was family night. That was everybody sitting down and we all watched Bond together, and which is an experience that a lot of people in the UK had, certainly of my age group.
It always surprises me to how everyone always talks about Bond being adult fare, but I think there's a commonality where it's a family thing. And I know that the Eon has made comments in the past about it being, sadism for the whole family and all that. But it really is something that seems to be kind of generational. And I've even had it with my kids when they were young. We would, every Saturday night, we would go pick up dinner and then come back and watch a Bond film. So it's an interesting tradition.
No, absolutely, yeah. And my parents went off the films with Pierce Brosnan. Really, they stopped watching them, but my siblings have continued to be Bond fans, not at the same level as me, but they still go and see Bond, and Bond's a big part of their lives.
By the way, one quick footnote about The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah.
It came out in 1974, and it was first on American television in 1977. And then it was the second showing on TV. There was this ad, TV guide about it. It was going to be on the ABC Sunday night movie. But whoever wrote the ad copy must not have seen the movie, because the description actually more closely matched the novel, because it even referenced Jamaica. And this was actually published in TV Guide. This got, nobody noticed until it was out.
No, nobody noticed apart from Bill.
And there was no internet to care or complain.
So yeah, exactly. Can you imagine if that happened today? Okay, and so I think probably we've covered about us and Bond. Do you want to talk about what's happening in the world of James Bond at the moment? Because, there's not
is
really...
there something happening?
Yeah, is there
I think that's
anything happening? That's the question.
Well, early this year, everyone's talking about, it's going to be Aaron Taylor Johnson. The Sun fueled that stuff. And of course, nothing happened. More recently, there's been speculation about a director. But one of the ones they speculated about blew it out of the water. That was Edward Berger. Said, not me.
Yeah. They didn't really add very much to the conversation there, but at least I think they were talking about the right thing, which is the director rather than who's going to be the next Bond actor, because unless they've got a director, they're not going to cast anybody. And, I think a lot of Bond fans forget that, and I think the tabloids don't care about the truth anyway, as long as they get eyeballs to sell their adverts. So, but, if you're listening to this, then every time you see something about the next actor, unless they've got a director, just you can forget about it. It's not happening.
Well, here's the thing too. It's such a big machine, like the Bond productions, and there's a lot of pomp and circumstance, even for the announcement of the title, that we're not going to hear who's directing Bond 26 from some tabloid. It's going to be kept under lock and key until Eon decides that we should know. And whoever it is going to deny it until that announcement comes, because Eon wants that to be theirs. And they want to control the narrative, which is fine. But I think of like Spider-Man No Way Home. And how there were rumors about, Andrew Garfield was going to come back as the Amazing Spider-Man and play a part in the movie. And up and down, people were asking him left and right in various interviews, because he was doing Tick, Tick, Boom and was doing a lot of press. And he would deny it vociferously every time, that he wasn't in the movie. He doesn't know how that started. That was, that set photo was photoshopped, and you can tell by XYZ. And then what happened when you saw the movie? He was in the movie. He was in the last third, and he was pivotal. Okay. So, there are certain things that aren't going to be revealed until the time is right. And we're not going to necessarily get official confirmation until Eon's ready for it.
Yeah.
If this guy is the director, and I'm not saying that he is or isn't, he's not going to tell it at like a press conference for another movie that's, the plan. He's going to deny it until whoever it is, they're going to deny it until Eon says they can talk about it, until Eon makes the proclamation.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. One thing that I do slightly disagree with it, though, is that even though there isn't an announcement, we tend to hear things. There's always something kind of echoing around about the director, because with Sam Mendes, there were indications that he was going to return for Spectre, a long time before it was confirmed. And if you go back to Skyfall, he was working on that unofficially for quite a long time as well.
He had a title as being a consultant. Yes. Which was intriguing. And then I remember seeing one of the major entertainment websites in the U.S. explained it in that they couldn't name him a director right away, because once they name a director, then that sets off a whole chain of legal things between Eon and the studio. And so he wasn't exactly off the books, but by not declaring him the director, there were business reasons for that. I forget all the ins and outs, but I do remember it was Deadline Hollywood was the site, explained what was going on, and it I think was pretty much on target as it turned out.
Yeah, and it meant that Sam Mendes got paid as well.
Right.
Which I guess, well, I was going to say which I understand completely, but if I had the chance to work on a Bond film for free, probably I'd take it, as long as they covered my expenses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there was recent fan speculation that they've already hired a director and they're going to make an announcement in November. Color me skeptical on that. I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm not going to believe it just because a, quote, super fan, unquote, as he was described in the article,
I can't see that happening, because that really isn't the way that Eon works.
Well, and also, I mean, the elephant in the room, they're working on this Othello movie, and they're working on a Broadway musical. And the musical is going to come out I think they go into previews in February, and the show debuts in March.
Yeah.
Who knows when the Othello movie is going to happen? So, I mean, recent articles totally either downplayed or didn't even mention Othello, and that's a factor. I mean, we'll see if Othello becomes a reality. They're apparently trying to get Middle Eastern financing for it,
or they've raised it depending on who you read. Yeah. It's we'll see where that goes. But yeah, it's probably the majority of film projects never go anywhere, so it could be one of those. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Okay. And anything else you want to add?
I'll just say this: over the past 8 years, there have been a number of fan predictions that have crashed and burned, going back to Daniel Craig is out, Broccoli's offered the role to Tom Hiddleston. That got blown out of the water when Tom Hiddleston was at an event. Hey, Tom, you'll be James Bond. And he was, I agree that people will deny things they know to be real, but there's sometimes the way they deny it tends to make me think it was like Hiddleston seemed rather wistful. No, like not happening. And there was another site that jumped on the Craig part, and then they both were wrong. Then there was a fan club that said, we've got great sources, and there's every chance that Christopher Nolan's going to direct Bond 25. And then, but around almost at the same time, Baz Bamaboy, when he was at the Daily Mail, was interviewing Nolan. He said, nope, not me, because he was working on his own thing. And then there was another fan speculation about the Bond 25 title, which he'll get mad if I mention it, but because I reminded him of it in a post within the last year, and he did not like being reminded about.
Okay, we'll be kind to Bond fandom, and we won't name and shame.
Yeah, I was just mentioning the particular guesses.
Yeah.
Do either of you have like a favorite director or actor you'd like to see take over?
I don't actually, and I think because I wouldn't want to tie myself to any particular actor or director, because if they don't come in, I don't want to be disappointed. I'd rather just let it unplay and see what happens, and hope to be surprised with what they do. Because it's funny with Daniel Craig. First of all, I wasn't convinced that he was going to be offered the role, because he just didn't look like the traditional Bond. And when he was, and I had my reservations. That was on the day of the press conference when he was announced. And I remember my wife got home from work, and I said, well, what do you think of this guy as Bond? And she was, yes, he is James Bond. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to question her taste in men. So I'm gonna go with it, and hope he works out, which he did for a film or two.
I feel pretty similar. I mean, first of all, they're not going to ask me, and I'm not going to get so hung up on an actor. It's got to be so and so, because I've seen people do that. And it's like if you narrow it down to one, it can only be this one. The odds are high that you're going to be disappointed. They're going to pick whoever they pick, and so I'm happy to wait and see.
Yeah, I remember hanging my hat on Clive Owen to take over for Pierce Brosnan, and obviously that didn't happen or work out. And that was kind of my moment of maybe I'll have like a wish list, but I'm not going to get too fixated on what I want, because that's not necessarily what's going to materialize. If something like Adele getting the title song, which is something I had hoped for, happened, then great. But similar to you two, if it's I'm just, whatever happens is what happens, and I'm not going to put too much into my own thoughts and hopes.
If I were going to say a director, I would say somebody like, and right, this is like underlined 3 times, Martin Campbell, but it's not going to be Martin Campbell. I want to underline that as well, because he's 80 now, and I think he's even if Eon felt he was the right person to do it, I don't think he would take it, because I think he's got better things to do with his time at that age, because making these films takes a lot of energy. You just need to ask Michael G. Wilson. But the thing about Martin Campbell is that he's not an auteur director. He is a workmanlike director, like John Glenn, and that is the kind of director that I think we need.
Well, in fact, the franchise was built on the shoulders of workmanlike directors. I mean, going back to Terrence Young and Guy Hamilton, but more recently, I've seen some public comments, and this is about 10, 15 years ago, where Barbara Broccoli said, "We do not hire directors for hire. We hire artists." And it's like, oh, really? Just...
Yeah. To state the whole thing another way, there are directors that I wouldn't like to direct Bond. One of them's Christopher Nolan, and the other really is Denis Villeneuve. And I like him as a director, but I think his films are way too long, and I just don't want another film that comes in at the same length as No Time to Die. I think the ideal length of a Bond film is anywhere between 2 hours and 2:20. After that, it needs to be cut.
I would agree that 2 hours just tends to be the Bond sweet spot for a runtime.
Yeah, Quantum of Solace was way too short. I don't want to go in that direction, but just 2 hours 10 is the perfect Bond length.
Well, and Dr. No and Goldfinger were both under 2 hours, about an hour and 50 minutes or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So you can do under 2, but it's
2
hours.
These days, though, Bill, with the end titles, it would take them well over 2 hours anyway.
The end titles add at least 5 minutes, because both of the movies I cited had very short end titles, because now they give credits for caterers and whatnot.
Yeah, caterers to the stunt team. Plus they need to thank all the sponsors and so on.
That's right.
Yes.
Caterers to the sponsors.
Yeah.
Okay, we're taking this too far. Well, thanks to you two for joining me today, and thanks to you, listener, and to this first episode of the 007 Files. And, we will be back soon with, we've got a discussion about License to Kill coming up, and I've got an interview with somebody who has visited GoldenEye, just to talk about what it's really like to stay there. So keep your eyes out on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Take care.
And a happy James Bond Day.
Oh, yes, and happy James Bond Day.